everyone. If you're wondering why I'm greeting you instead of Anastasia, I might have broken her. You're probably wondering why. Maybe the reason will go out on social media. But let's just say that I am very, very prepared right now for the Sunshine Double, which is coming up very soon. And we're going to be explaining all of that to you on episode 11 of Ground Pass. Anastasia, you all right?
I mean, I'm trying to recover. Because while you're wearing sunglasses inside, like you're too cool for school, but it's perfect. It is perfect to cover the Sunshine Double because it will be really sunny, fingers crossed, during the Sunshine Double, which is coming up soon. I can't believe it. I feel like, where did the year go already? It's almost March and it's almost time for both tours to be back in the States for a very long time. Like when you think of the Sunshine Double, that's a full month of tennis.
It's like a mega slam in some ways. And that's why I think the Sunshine Double is as highly regarded as it is, because you've got two packed draws that not quite as big as a slam. It's 96 players who get to enter instead of 128, but you still have to win 6 consecutive matches, both if you're a seed over a period of 4 weeks. That's quite a physical achievement. I know slams can be tough because it's 2 weeks of tennis where you're playing every other day. But with this, it's 4 weeks of playing every other day in 2 different locations that are challenging for different reasons.
Right. With 2 different climates. But I was thinking about this the other day because I was like, oh, this is a mega slam. And for everyone listening, I know we just jumped right into this, but the Sunshine Double is the combination of Indian Wells and the Miami Open that happen in the month of March in the United States. And if you don't know, the Indian Wells tournament is sometimes called the 5th slam, colloquially. And I was just wondering, because Nick is always the history buff guy who knows all the numbers and all the history, but were both events always 2 weeks, or were they ever 1 week events?
No. So they only became 2 week events in the mid 2000s, especially for the women. The women's, actually, they're both 1,000 events on the tour, but actually the women's Indian Wells tournament wasn't upgraded to a 1,000 level until 1996. Before that, it was a 500 level. So I don't know if you could imagine Indian Wells being a 500 event, but there you go. And then but even then, that was still half the size of the draw of the men. Yeah, they both got updated, and it's interesting that now Indian Wells is called the 5th slam, because actually Miami was called that, especially for the WTA players back in the 90s, before Indian Wells got upgraded. So Miami's got the sort of legacy status, as it were, but also they're both fairly recent additions compared to a lot of the other tennis players. So Indian Wells wasn't really a tournament. Neither were really a tournament until the mid 80s, 85, 86, 87, that kind of period. And I think Indian Wells was always a Masters 1000 event when that was created, when the ATP Tour took over the running of men's tennis in 1990. So, but obviously for the women, it's kind of been a bit more of a journey. But yeah, comparatively, if you think about it, like the furthest back legends of the sport that you may have heard of, like Borg, McEnroe, if you have a longer memory, Rod Laver, they never actually played Indian Wells or Miami. It's something that really,
because they're so new,
began with your Boris Beckers, Martina Navratilovas, those kind of players.
Yeah. And so I think what a lot of people might also know about these tournaments, especially Indian Wells, I'll say, because I think Indian Wells has had a lot of like storylines attached to it. And the 2 biggest ones I would say is, first, players seem to really, really love Indian Wells. Like, it's called Tennis Paradise, and I've never been. The photos I see look gorgeous because you just have these scenes of like tennis courts and the backdrop are mountains and palm trees and stuff. Do you know why that is? I mean, hopefully one day we can all go to Indian Wells and experience it in person. Is it just a pretty venue, or do players love it for other reasons?
I don't know too much about the players, to be honest. I think for a lot of reasons, the players would probably love it because of the reasons the players would love a tournament is the hospitality the tournament would provide. If you've watched Dario Casakina's vlogs, that ends up being quite a key part of everything. But also the crowds and what kind of atmosphere they get at these tournaments. And also, I think the competition they get as well. So I think it's a combination of Indian Wells particularly has got the cash to kind of splash to make the players feel like stars, but also Indian Wells is tennis paradise, not just for the tennis players, but for the tennis fans who go. And it's a very fan-oriented event. I think because of that, the fans who go to Indian Wells are far more engaged, very knowledgeable about the game. And there's a lot of things that help players connect to them and sort of win them over. And I think that's another reason why the players might enjoy it. Indian Wells is very much on my, if I ever found the ability to pay for a flight to California and tickets, 100% would go. It looks incredible. And it's because of that reputation of being built as a tennis tournament. I think what's happened with the slams is interesting, is that a lot of their status comes from their history, their longevity, though. They were the original events in many ways. I mean, there's maybe one or two events that maybe slightly older than a couple of them, but beyond that, they're the national championships, and they kind of probably feel like a nation's celebration of tennis, but it's all about the nation hosting it, and also the history that goes with it, and maybe some of the kind of, it's like an event. It's just an event, a wider event than just a tennis event. Whereas Indian Wells is geared towards being a celebration of tennis at the highest level. It's in a part of the world that, it's another American tournament. It's a relatively modern one. And so there's a little bit of history hanging over it, but it can market it itself as, if you're a tennis fan, this is the event to visit.
Definitely on my list of places to visit because all the pictures from it look good. If you follow Rafael Nadal on Instagram, he has actually just arrived at Indian Wells and he's playing on this court and the mountains are in the background and the sun is setting and you're thinking, wow, I would want to play tennis on that court. In that location. And I've started doing research. So if you follow us on social media, you know that I've been working on these sort of local tournament guides for our listeners and people who follow us on social media to sort of help people, because it can be tough deciding when to go, what tickets to buy, how do you see your favorite players, etc. So I've been working on the Indian Wells and Miami Open version of these events and just looking into the sort of activities for fans, the tickets, how practice courts and all of that. Indian Wells does seem very geared towards fans and people who love tennis and want to enjoy tennis. So I can imagine, you saying, why does an athlete, a tennis player, love a specific tournament? It's because they kind of get that sort of love and support from their fans and they have access to that too. So it seems like a really exciting tournament. It does have a little bit, and I don't think we can talk about Indian Wells without talking about the Williams sisters, who for a time didn't, I think if you just look up Indian Wells, it comes up. It's one of the first things that comes up. But the Williams sisters didn't attend this event for a long time.
No, they didn't. And that was because of an incident in 2001 where they were supposed to play each other in the semi-finals. Venus pulled out and the crowd in the final were very against Serena because they believed the result was rigged. And there were probably a lot of other motivations mixed in there as well. Which it got very nasty, and so justifiably Serena and Venus didn't play that tournament for nearly for about 15 years. I think they went back in 2018. Was that the year they finally agreed to come back? And ended up playing each other in that tournament. But yeah, for a long time the Williams sisters didn't play. So obviously if you look at the roll of honor of people who've actually won the Sunshine Double, like obviously I think Serena's won Indian Wells, I'm pretty sure she won that final, but people who've won the Sunshine Double, both tournaments back to back, neither of their names are on there.
Yeah, because they didn't attend Indian Wells for a long time. They're back now. I know Venus Williams is actually going to be in this tournament this year. So it'll be exciting to watch her play at Indian Wells. But that kind of brings me to Miami, which I have attended. Miami is definitely a closer trip for me on the East Coast. So I have been to the Miami Open. And it has a very interesting history. Like you said, it is the longest, it is the oldest of both. It's been there before, but the sort of venue of where the Miami Open in Florida has changed
Yes.
a couple of times. Right now, the structure they have is shared, I would say. It's really funny. For you, I know you, Nick, you are an F1 fan,
Yeah.
but what happens right after the Miami Open is the Miami Grand Prix at the exact same venue. So it's like they take down this temporary tennis court and put in a temporary, track.
Yes, which, it's almost like they take everything apart like instantly because they've got to put the next thing up. I think they've got a little bit more of a gap to play with this time because I think Miami Grand Prix is not until the first week of May. But it's interesting you say that. So you talk about the history. Like, yeah, Miami used to be in Crandon Park. I don't know Miami. Maybe some of our listeners are from Miami. They might know it. But now it's literally held on the site of the Miami Dolphins. To the point where they build a tennis court in the middle of a football stadium, which from aerial shots looks bizarre. And it's clearly a very temporary structure when you look at it in the close-up.
Yeah, and I have to say from attending it, it's interesting. So the main stadium, it just seems so temporary because you're almost going through scaffolding and then you sort of pop up on these sort of temporary stands and all of a sudden you see a court. The outside courts are a little bit more, I think, they feel a little bit more like the US Open if you've attended. But it definitely has a look to it, which I don't know that I love. It's also, in terms of visiting the tournament, pretty difficult because it says the Miami Open, but it's closer to Fort Lauderdale in Florida than it is to Miami. So if you decide to stay in Miami, for example, to go to the Miami Open, you're going to be sitting in sort of 2-hour traffic every day trying to get to the courts. So it's a very fascinating tournament. I can't wait to make the video previewing the tournament and giving tips and tricks for visitors who want to go see the tennis. Because I'm going again this year, for example, and I'm switching it up. Instead of staying in Miami, I'm actually going to stay in Fort Lauderdale, which is closer and more accessible to the court.
So top tip for people who want to get there, maybe spoilers for that video, get up early.
Oh, really early. I didn't know that the first time I went, and I would sit in traffic for hours missing the tennis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, going back to sort of why this is obviously, so this is a big deal because of the status of the tournaments, obviously being 1000s, but also the kind of history behind it, the money that gets thrown at it, the size of the draws is what makes it particularly tricky because normally to win a 1000, you're winning 5 matches if you're a seed, maybe 6, whereas you definitely need to win at least 6, maybe even 7 if you're a lower seed. And so that makes the draw a little bit is going to make that a little bit more challenging physically, as well as it's called Sunshine Double for a reason. It's the sunny desert followed by the sunny beach in Florida. Okay, it's not that close to the beach in reality, but in Miami. But that means you're going from something a bit more dry to a bit more humid. Pretty much overnight, in addition to playing probably like having the kind of ups and downs you'd expect from a slam.
Yeah. And based on last year's weather, you were going from somewhere dry and cold to somewhere hot, humid, and rainy. I mean, it couldn't have been more different climate-wise. So it's really interesting because you've been saying the Sunshine Double now for a while. We have been, but it is kind of a thing to win the Sunshine Double. Not a lot of people have done it. Very few people have done it. And it's probably because of the different conditions. Like it's tough to go from, dry, crisp weather to hot, sweaty, possibly rainy weather. Do you think that's the main reason why it's so hard to win the double? Or do you think it also has to do with how physically fit you have to be to sort of play that much tennis in a month?
It is both, because you're playing every other day for a month in different conditions, and you have to get used to both. And traditionally, I think it's less extreme now. They've changed locations in Miami, but it used to be you were going from a slower court where the ball doesn't travel as fast after bouncing, compared to Miami, which is a bit quicker, and maybe had players who are a bit stronger on faster courts like Roger Federer and John Isner performing well there. I do have the list of people who've won the Sunshine Double, though. It's 11 people,
Let's go.
7 men, 4 women. Actually, yeah, do you know what? How many can you name, Anastasia, off the top of your head?
Ooh, okay. Top of my head, I know Iga has won it.
Yes, she's the most recent
winner.
Most recent person who's done it in 2022.
Yes. Roger's done it.
Yes, he's done it 3 times.
Who else has done it? I really think that's all I know. 1 second. Has Rafa done it?
Rafa's never won Miami. Rafa's never won Miami in his whole career.
No.
Which I didn't, as a Nadal fan, I wasn't sure if you were aware of, but maybe just
no, I had no idea.
Blank that.
Yeah, exactly. It was just erased from my memory.
It's definitely been more
it doesn't exist, this tournament.
It's definitely been more of a Roger, Novak, Andy court than a Rafa court.
Right. Okay, so I can only guess 2. Who are the others?
Okay, so of the men, Jim Courier was the first to do it in 91. Michael Chang did it in 92. Pete Sampras did it in 94. Marcelo Rios did it in 1998. The only person who's never won a slam to have won the Sunshine Double.
Wow.
Andre Agassi in 2001. And Novak Djokovic did it 4 times in his career, including 3 years on the bounce, 14, 15, 16.
Wow.
Which is Novak for you. Only 4 women have done it. So I said Iga's the most recent. Steffi Graf did it twice in 94 and 96, but 96 was the first year where they were both 1,000 level events. So the first time she did it was a 500 followed by 1,000, slightly different. So, but she did it properly in 96. Kim Clijsters in 2005, and then Victoria Azarenka did it in 2016, shortly before finding out she was pregnant.
Oh.
It was short, I
wonder if she was during.
I don't know if she was during, but I can't remember if she got injured and then got pregnant. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. But that's the last tournament she kind of played, more or less, before she had to take time off, because at the time, she was coming back. But yeah, there's your Sunshine Double winners. So very prestigious players, all players probably renowned for being very physically top form. And actually, last year, we did actually come close to 2 players.
We did.
Because 2 players made the finals last year. Daniel Medvedev made the ATP finals, and Elena Rybakina made the WTA finals. But Rybakina won Indian Wells, didn't win Miami. Other way around for Medvedev.
So yeah, it seems like it is definitely a large feat to win the Sunshine Double. Looking at the field this year, I think there's a lot of excitement coming into both tournaments this year because there's just a lot of players coming back. And I think the storylines coming out of, especially Indian Wells, because I don't know how many people will last through to Miami physically, because of their physical issues or anything like that. But starting with Indian Wells, we have Novak. He's back playing, hasn't played.
5 years. It's 5 years since he last played in Indian Wells.
Which is crazy. I was wait, has it really been that long? And you think, yeah, because there was the times when he couldn't travel here. But even before that, he hadn't attended it. So
no, it was literally just because he couldn't travel. It's the only reason.
Did he do it in 19?
Yeah, he played in
19.
2019. He played in 19.
Okay, so he played 2019 and then couldn't come here. Yes, and then that's why he hasn't done it. But then we have Rafael Nadal coming back. He hasn't played since Brisbane. He was going to maybe come back for the Middle East swing, but he decided to sort of take that time off, and he's going to be back again for Indian Wells. We have Naomi Osaka playing. who else is coming back? Oh, Venus got a wild card, so she's going to be playing. I'm really excited for this field of players that are coming in to play Indian Wells.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's, as we've said before, it's comparable with a slam because everyone's there. And, Venus being there, Razor Stakes, Nadal being there, lends kind of a legendary status to it. Like, this is the place to come visit and have an opportunity to see these legends playing the sport, especially since we don't know when the last time will be.
Yeah.
Definitely for Venus, because she's keeping her cards much closer to her chest on the subject. Rafa might be a bit clearer. That's why. I think also one of the reasons why Indian Wells is so interesting is that both tours, like all the top players are going to be there. And both tours currently have a clear top four. And really, it's a tournament that all of those players could win. There's not really... I don't think there's anyone who would struggle more so to win Indian Wells out of the WTA side. Definitely not. And the men and the ATP side, again, definitely not. I mean, like, even Daniil Medvedev, who complains about slower hard courts, is a former finalist here. So,
yeah.
And I've got no reason to see why Jannik Sinner wouldn't do well. Djokovic and Alcaraz are former champions. Alcaraz is the defending champion. So I think that's one of the reasons why this tournament's going to be so fascinating is we're going to be watching the progress of those kind of 8 players.
Super excited for the Sunshine Double. It's kind of my, tennis is kind of back in my neck of the woods, kind of. So time zones are great for me. And these are some tournaments that I can visit locally. So I'm really excited to have the Sunshine Double coming up quickly. It's crazy how fast the year has gone and how much tennis has been played already. But this brings us to what's been going on tour over the last 2 weeks that we've been away. And can I tell you, a lot has happened in 2 weeks.
I have had some fantastic text exchanges with you on WhatsApp, Anastasia. There's been a lot of very excited all caps messages.
Yes.
About something.
All caps messages. Yes. About a lot of players. But, I think it's been easier for maybe you to follow on the WTA because they've just been basically 2 big events on the WTA side. Counting on the ATP side, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 events over the past 2 weeks.
We haven't even finished one of them yet.
All of them.
As of recording.
And yes, one of them is still going, but Rio is still happening. But let's start with the WTA. Can maybe even bounce back and forth between events. Packed week. Exciting week, I think. Where do you want to start?
Well, we've been talking a lot about the Sunshine Double and the sort of the challenge of going from one city to another, both 2-week events, but sort of geographically similar location. We've had that in mini form and a condensed form on the WTA because we've had Doha, which is a slower hard court. Again, when we talk about speed, we're talking about when the ball bounces, does it slow down or speed up, essentially, after what happens. So Doha's slower reaction. Dubai is quicker. One of our friends was covering the tournament there and he told me the conditions in Dubai were like ice in terms of very low, very fast.
Wow.
Which is, there was a lot of adjustments to be made, especially since, there were still fairly decent sized draws I needed to get through. A seed needs to win 5 or 6 matches to win the title. And we kind of saw over the course of those 2 weeks, some players ran out of gas, including very well-established players. And I'm thinking of Iga Swiatek and Elena Rybakina, which I'm going to start with. So they played the final in Doha and they played a first set tiebreak that was an hour and a half and was one of the best sets I've ever seen. I loved it. Heart in the mouth as an Iga Swiatek fan, but I couldn't fault how good the tennis was. And what I really enjoyed was the forehand to forehand exchanges, because Elena's forehand is a lot flatter than Swiatek's. She doesn't put as much spin on it. It doesn't rotate as much. But Iga was coping with it really, really well. And so like their 2 big weapons going head to head was just beautiful to watch for a set, hour and a half. Iga was 2 breaks down, 4-1. Then Rybakina hits herself in the leg while serving.
I remember this.
Drawing blood. The rule is you have to stop playing if blood is drawn, and she had to get it patched up. Iga got time to reset, broke back, broke again. Elena then broke to try and serve for the first set. Iga broke straight back. We went to a tiebreak, and the tiebreak went back and forth. And eventually Iga just about edged that tiebreak and then took control of the match from there. So the second set didn't quite live up to the first, but it was still pretty decent. And that kind of ended up affecting what happened in Dubai, because what happened was we were kind of watching Dubai going, are they going to be able to do it? Like, Iga should be the favourite. I wasn't convinced because she doesn't necessarily always feel comfortable in those kind of conditions. And Iga got to the semis. She beat some tricky players. She beat Elina Svitolina, Zhang Qinwen. Then, unfortunately, she had this physical dip in the middle of her semi-final with Anna Kalinskaya that put her in a position where she had to fight back, and it was just too much. Kalinskaya was also playing really, really well, but we'll come back to her. So whereas Rybakina got to the quarterfinals of Dubai and then pulled out with some kind of stomach illness, is what the reason she's given. I do think fatigue must have played a role in that. And so what we ended up with was the Dubai event being a lot crazier than the Doha event, where the Doha event was all the quarterfinalists were Grand Slam finalists, had been to a Grand Slam final at least once in their careers. The Dubai quarterfinals was a lot more about people making breakthroughs. And it was quite interesting to see the contrast between those two tournaments.
Which is my favorite kind of final, semifinal. I think that was basically my theme for these 2 weeks was watching players make their breakthrough. And I know for some tennis fans, they just want to see Nadal win everything and Novak win everything and Carlos Alcaraz and Sinner, and they just should win everything. But that's not, in my mind, tennis. And watching these players make breakthroughs in this tournament has been so exciting, because it makes the game a little bit more lively and exciting. And when your favorite, a Sinner or an Alcaraz or whoever comes against these new players who are just on a run, that just even makes it a little bit
more,
I don't know.
And that's one of the reasons why I've been much closer to WTA tennis in more recent years, because you have had all these breakthrough stories and people having their moment in the sun a lot more often than on the ATP side because of what we had in recent times with the big three. I think there is a balance. I think, that people would say, but it gives you more interesting matches to have these kind of elite players made later on the tournament. And I would say, yeah, those are interesting, but there should be room for others. And you're also maybe discounting how good all these professionals are. The standard of professional tennis players has risen steadily over the years, and I think they are deserving of some kind of moment in the sun, which is what Jasmine Paolini had when she won Dubai, beating Anna Kalinskaya in the final, neither of which had been that deep in a big event before. They'd both reached the second week of a slam for the first time in Australia this year and played each other there. Kalinskaya winning that match, but Paolini won the rematch in quite spectacular style, in that Kalinskaya came in having beaten 3 top 10 players: Jelena Ostapenko, Coco Gauff, and Iga Swiatek. Paolini had battled her way through some tough players as well. She'd beaten Layla, she'd beaten Haddad Maia, she'd beaten Sakkari, was due to play Rybakina, but Rybakina pulled out. And what happened was Kalinskaya was the ascendancy for a lot of the match, but Paolini just wouldn't give up, worked her way back in, and she kind of fought back, and it was a really, really good match, which kind of defeats the point of, you don't need the top 4 to play each other to have a good match. These two were ranked outside the top 20, and it was still a really decent quality battle. And it was a shame one of them had to lose, really, because they both played so well. They both deserved the breakthrough. Paolini's someone I've been following for a few years because she had a very exciting match with Victoria Azarenka in the second round of the US Open in 2021. And that put her on the radar as, she gives us exciting matches. Let's see if she can put it all together. And aged 28, she's now managed to put it all together.
And Paolini, I think her theme a little bit in this tournament has been like the sort of the comeback queen. Her first round match against Beatrice Haddad Maia was just, 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. She won the last 2 sets. But she has this fighting spirit. And I mean, she must be 5'5" or 5'4". She's a very small player. So you see her, and it was especially evident with at the Beatrice Haddad-Maia match, because Beatrice is like 6 foot tall, and you see this small pint-sized just ball of energy who refuses to stop and hits the ball so hard. And there is an energy to her that is very similar to me with Leylah Fernandez, who she actually did beat in this tournament in the next round. But they have very similar just energy. I think Leylah doesn't hit as hard, and she would, I think maybe that's what Leylah needs a little bit, is sort of to beef up her ground strokes. But I love her energy. I love her fighting spirit. And it's really been nice to see. I think last year, I think it was during the clay court season, either right after the French Open or just before, she got to the final of, what tournament was that? It was the one just before the Transylvania Open.
Monastir, I think. Lost to Mertens.
Monastir, yes. And that was the first time she kind of came on my radar. I was like, oh, who is this? And making it all the way to the finals. She didn't win. And I think she went deep in the Transylvania Open too, but didn't win. And it's just nice to see her finally make that breakthrough and win a 1,000 event,
Because she has won a 250 in her career already.
Yes, she has, yeah.
Whereas Kalinskaya, this was her first final of her career. What a way to do it. 26 years old, has been battling injuries and other stuff her career. But this year in 2024, she's been showing a lot of potential. Like, she was losing to good players in good matches every single tournament.
Yeah.
So they're both now going to be seeded for Indian Wells. It's highly likely they're going to both be seeded for the next 2 majors at Roland Garros and Wimbledon. Paolini's now top 20. So I think it was nice. It was nice to see sort of both of them doing well, but it was hard to kind of pick a winner.
Because they both have very similar, I think, not stories or trajectories, but they both have this thing where they've been working hard to get to where they've been. And this was sort of the reward for all the hard work they've been doing. I mean, Anna Kalinskaya came on my radar, not because of her playing, actually, but because of her coach, who she happens to have one of the few female coaches out there in tennis in general. So I was reading a lot of articles on Patricia Tarabini, who's her coach. She used to be a player as well. It's just, I love coaching player relationships and seeing how those work, because I think sometimes we tend to think it's very interesting, because in other sports, for example, that I watch, football, basketball, the coach has more of a sort of status or more of a personality on a team. People think, oh, who's the coach? And that can affect how a team plays. And I think in tennis, it's really easy to forget, because you do have an individual player hitting the ball, and that's, what people see, but people tend to not see the sort of work behind the scenes, the strategies. We're starting to see that now, that coaching is allowed, and you can sort of hear what these coaches are telling their players and things like that. So I love seeing coaching player relationships, and it seems like Anna Kalinskaya has a really good one, and it's great to see the results of that come to fruition. There are 2 other players, though, before we move off to the ATP, that I kind of want to talk about, because although, I mean, they both got to the quarterfinals, and that's Caroline Pliskova and Naomi Osaka in Doha. So the tournament before Dubai, I think they had good runs, because Pliskova was coming from winning a tournament at the Transylvania Open. I can't remember the timeline, but she basically flew to Doha and played tennis right away.
Pliskova's run was ridiculous. So, a little bit of background for those who may be a bit newer. Karolina Pliskova is a former world number 1, has never won a Grand Slam, but she's been in 2 finals and went 3 sets in both those finals. She, in recent years, has had a little bit of a slump, to the point where she was kind of in danger of dropping out the top 40. Went to Cluj in Romania to play the 250 there. Wasn't even seeded for a 250. Wins the tournament, gets on the plane to Doha in Qatar. So Google it. Those countries are nowhere near each other.
Nope, they're not.
And as soon as she landed, she had to play her first match because Doha started the day of her final in Romania. So she had to get over. She was on the second day and she battled her way through, can I say, because she went 3 sets in almost every match. She literally played under Noshkova. Noshkova was serving for the match at 5-4 in the second set. She was a set and 5-4 up with a break, and Pliskova breaks back and barely drops a game. She only dropped like a game or two after that. That's one example. But like she ended up in battles, and like every match she was playing, I was like, surely she's going to run out of gas. Surely she's going to run out of gas. And then she plays Osaka, former Grand Slam champion, in the quarters, wins 7-6, 7-6. And then pulls out of her semi-final against Swiatek with back injury. I think she was probably just physically spent by that point. Yeah. Given that, we say she flew over, she played 8 matches in 8 days. You don't even do that at a slam. You don't even do that during the Sunshine Double. And so that physical effort to get there is doing that. And actually, as we're talking about this, it's dawned on me that maybe our sort of expectations of what players can achieve, maybe they shouldn't be pushed this hard, but they are able to play day after day after day for a couple of solid weeks if they really needed to. Because we were asking the same sort of questions of Elena Rybakina, who won Abu Dhabi, then played Doha, got to the final, lost a tough match with Swiatek, and then still made the quarters in Dubai. And we were always asking, when's she going to stop? Surely that's enough. Surely that's enough. And she just keeps winning. So huge kudos to those players for doing it. But yeah, Pliskova was one of these stories of Doha. And by the way, she also got to the last 16 of Dubai and lost to Coco Gauff in a tough match.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective you just gave, because we do tend to be like, oh, well, why don't they just win everything? And you're like, well, you try playing tennis for 8 days in a row in 2 different continents, So it's really, I always say tennis players, it's sort of an endurance sport as well. It's an endurance sport in a way. And they have to do a lot to sort of stay fit and win tournaments. And it is really great to see what they can do. It was really nice to see Naomi Osaka back in quarterfinals. I think she's finally getting a hang of it. I think a lot of people were upset that she pulled out of Dubai after getting to the quarterfinals in Doha. But again, I think this is part of the sort of like our expectations of what tennis players can or should do need to be based in some sort of reality, because she just had a child. She gave birth to a child and is back on a tennis court like nothing happened. To get to the quarterfinals so quickly, I think is pretty impressive. And we're going to see her back at Indian Wells. And I think she got the matches she needed to prepare. And we'll see where she gets to in Indian Wells. Because again, she's coming back. People are expecting her to win everything. And you're thinking, well, but the tour, I actually think it would be weird if Naomi Osaka came back from giving birth and just won everything right away. Because you're thinking, well, but the tour's been going and there are other players who are also building and growing. And, I don't think it would be sort of a good look if she just came back and was like, oh, winning everything. It's nice to see there's still a bit of competition.
I would also say with Naomi, she's never done that. She's never dominated week after week after week. Naomi's a unbeatable player when she peaks, but the peak doesn't happen very often. But she's very good at making it happen when it matters, when everyone's watching, which is at slams, usually the US and Australian Opens. And so that's what you've got to bear in mind. Like, here's a stat. Whenever Naomi Osaka has gotten past the 4th round of a slam, she's won it.
Wow.
And she's only ever lost one 4th round Grand Slam match. So she's 4-1 in Grand Slam matches, 4-0 in quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals at slams. And that's what you got to bear in mind. But if you look at the rest of her career, she's only won 2 1,000 events. Indian Wells in 2018, Beijing 2019. She has a game that is quite streaky, but when she schedules it right, she's unbeatable. So maybe we will. I think what we look at with Naomi is what the tennis that we know she can produce, but maybe with slightly rose-tinted spectacles on how often she produces it.
Just so this podcast is not 3 hours long, because we still have 6 events to cover on the ATP side.
Quick fire, let's go.
Let's go. Yes, there were 6 events over the last 2 weeks on the ATP tour. The Argentinian Open was won by Facundo Diaz Acosta. And this was kind of the beginning, I think, of the sort of breakthroughs. He started it during the Argentinian Open, and I think he sort of, the floodgates opened. And, I think there is a thing to other players seeing someone do well that kind of gives them the sort of, well, I could do that mentality. And Facundo Diaz was not someone anyone was thinking was going to win Buenos Aires. In the field was former finalists and the winner, Carlos Alcaraz, Cam Norrie, Nicolas Jarry. There were big names in this tournament, and for him to come through and be the winner was great, especially as he is from Argentina. To winning at home during the Golden Swing was exciting, I think, for the area and for tennis in South America. I think that one of the big stories that will come out of the Golden Swing is Carlos Alcaraz. He lost in the semis to Nicolas Jarry, who I think is a player that he's always had issues with. I think they had a very interesting match at not Indian Wells, at Wimbledon, right?
Yes, in Wimbledon. Jarry took a set off him at Wimbledon. Just to be clear, when we say issues with, we mean only on the court, not off it.
Oh, only on the court. We only talk about tennis on court. There is actually the cutest video. If I find it online, I'll post it, of Carlos playing like sort of ground tennis with Nicolas Jarry's son, and it's so cute. They're just like hitting a ball back and forth with tennis rackets on the floor. It's really cute. I'll find it and leave a link to it. But I think the sort of player, Jarry, super tall, really big serve, really heavy ground stroke. So I think that is the sort of player who can affect Carlos Alcaraz. And I think, Carlos is at this, I didn't realize, I think, how popular he was until, jumping ahead, he had a little bit of a fall in his first match at the Rio Open and couldn't play. But he's still there, and he attended as a guest, as just someone in the audience, the Rio semifinals. And, he was there with David Ferrer, and they had an announcement, and he stood up, and there was applause. And I was like, what is this? Is this like, is it not Roger Federer? He's not Roger Federer at Wimbledon, but that's exactly what it looked like. And I thought, oh, wow, he's like a star at this point in his career, which is so crazy, because I think I still see him as someone who just popped up on the scene. But no, I think a lot of people are sort of like, oh, he didn't win, the Golden Swing, and is he ever going to win again? Is he done? And I'm thinking, we need to be able to give players a little bit more grace, because I think just from our conversation on the WTA side, it takes a lot to win all these tournaments and be consistent all the time. And it's okay to have slumps. I think, can't remember what, I maybe it was Robbie Koenig or a commentator somewhere, pointed back to, when the big three were 20, they weren't winning everything all of the time. They built up to that status where they, were multiple slam winners.
Unless you're Nadal on clay.
I think, unless you're Nadal on clay, which then, you're just going to win 14 French Opens on the first try. I think a lot of people love to compare, and yes, he has built up this rivalry with Sinner, and which brings me to the Rotterdam Open, which Sinner, recent winner of the Australian Open, just was like, sure, I could do it again.
He kind of cruised to that one, didn't he? He cruised that one.
I mean, he just cruised to the final like it was nothing. He was just tennis. I live for tennis. I'm great at it. And that was that. I mean, that's the sort of dominance I think people love to see. I also think there was a stat. Oh, I can't remember now, but a lot of players after winning their first Grand Slam, they sort of crash out of their next tournament. They're done in he was the first one to do it in a very long time, where he went from winning a Grand Slam to winning his very next tournament. It was a really great performance. He played Alex de Minaur in the final, really great final. Unfortunately, he now has a 7-0 head-to-head lead on Alex de Minaur. I don't know Alex de Minaur what he can do to sort of fix this, but he did give him a run for his money. And unfortunately, you're thinking, well, if that was the best that de Minaur could play, is he just never going to flip this head-to-head? But then again, I could say that about Sinner and Medvedev before Sinner flipped that head-to-head. Hopefully next time they meet, it'll be even more competitive, and maybe Alex will get on top. But Alex de Minaur is now in the top 10 by getting to the finals of Rotterdam. And I think he's a player deserving of that. I think he's been showing signs since he played Next Gen that he could get to that level. And it's really nice to see Alex in the top 10. So I think I hit Rotterdam,
Buenos Aires,
Del Rey. Taylor Fritz won Del Rey again, which was, really good defense of his title. I think that put him actually back into the top 10 because he fell out for a little bit, for a few days, I think.
He would have dropped out if he hadn't defended the title.
Got it. Yeah. I think in the live ranking, he was out.
Yeah, due to results this week, I think he is now definitely dropping out.
The top 10 is changing.
So I think I've got it. I'm looking it up because... stuff was happening in Los Cabos in Mexico this week. So we've now knocked off all week 1. We're now into week 2. So Los Cabos just happened, where Jordan Thompson beat Casper Ruud in the final. Ruud could have got back in the top 10 if he'd won the title. But Thompson has kind of having a sort of an autumn summer, as it sort of whatever you want to call it. That's the autumn summer. What the heck am I talking about?
What is an autumn summer?
It's 29 as well, so he's not even that late stage career, but he's finally won an ATP title after years and years of trying, a bit like sort of Paolini on the WTA tour that we're talking about. 250 not a
Just to do a little bit on Jordan Thompson, because I think people are like, oh my God, he won. But all year, he's been really hitting it. He was in 1 semifinal, 2 quarterfinals, and he beat Nadal at Brisbane. So he's been sort of itching and scratching at the door, and he finally made it. And just on this specific title at Los Cabos, he won the finals against Casper Ruud. He then went on to play semis with Max Purcell right after his finals match, and won that against Casper Ruud and his teammate. And then he played the final doubles all in the same night and won the doubles championship.
Oh my word.
If you did not believe that the ATP was scripted, I think this is your proof. I think this is the proof that it is scripted.
That is the best night any tennis player could possibly have. To win 3 matches back to back to back to back on the same court in one night is mental. That man's going to be exhausted. Yep. He deserves all the margaritas, and
all of them. Which I think he's in the Acapulco draw, but let's get there. I'm not sure.
It's a 500. There's big point number, but he just played he just played the equivalent probably of a long 5-setter. Let's face it. By the way, I was completely wrong. Fritz is holding on to the top 10 by his fingernails. He is 30 points ahead of Ruud.
Okay. So Ruud is 11?
Yes, and then you got Tsitsipas.
Okay.
Not far behind, actually. Tsitsipas is 70 points behind, which they sound like a lot maybe to newer listeners, but you get 70 points for reaching the second round of a slam, second or third round. You get 90 points for raking third round of a slam. So, couple of decent wins for your opponents, and you're going to drop back.
Before we go on to talk about Rio, which the final will be happening later this afternoon, just a little bit about the top 10, because it's been in the conversations all week. No more one-handed backhands in the top 10 for the first time ever, because Tsitsipas is out and Grigor didn't make it in. I don't know what your feelings about this are. I don't really have any strong feelings. I love a good one-handed backhand. I think it's really pretty to watch. But whether or not it kind of leaves tennis as a sort of a style of a ground stroke, I don't know. I don't have any sort of strong feelings on if it goes. Roger Federer will always be my only my one and only one-handed backhand guy.
Yeah, I think it depends on your age, because I think there's a certain level of, if you've been watching tennis for decades, you expect tennis to be played with one hand. The double hander is a relatively recent evolution of the game. Very few people played with two hands 50, 60 years ago. Bjorn Borg was the one who kind of made a two-hander work. And everyone went, oh, okay, maybe we should start doing that. And, even Roger Federer said recently, if he was coaching his kids, he would teach them to play with two on the backhand. It creates a little bit more stability, a bit more strength to the shot. It makes sense. Do I think tennis is more interesting with more variety in how the game is played? Yes. But let's face it, there's not even any one-handed backhands in the women's top 10 anymore. We've only got one, maybe two in the top 100. Now, it's already happened in the women's game long time ago. So, yeah, it was inevitable. I think tennis is more interesting if you have a mix, but I'm similar to you. I'm not necessarily going to be super emotional about it.
Okay, well, we have two more tournaments to cover, which I think kind of brought the all caps conversation on WhatsApp this week.
I think the theme here is very much, it's not necessarily about who won these tournaments. It's about who made a name for themselves in these tournaments. One of these was Rio, and the other one was in the men's event in Doha. So you're going to start hearing the word Doha again a lot, but this time we're talking about the ATP. Although unlike the WTA, it's 250, not a 1,000.
Yes, they have. And I wonder if they'll ever become sort of like the Sunshine Double, where they become mixed events. But in Doha, we had Karen Khachanov was the winner of the tournament. And I think he had a pretty, normal run to the final. Nothing crazy. I think Karen, it was a good win for him. I think it's his sixth trophy that he's won. I think the cute thing about it is, so there's this thing where, Karen Khachanov, Andrei Rublev and Daniil Medvedev are all friends, and there's some tournaments and that they've all won, and this is now the third one that they all have trophies from the same tournament. It's cute. But the story, I think, of Doha, I know, was Jakub Mensik, who our friend Damien Kuss, who is a journalist who covers the Challenger Tour, first introduced me to last year. He couldn't stop talking about him. I was like, who is this player? Who's this Czech player? I don't know who he is. He was a teenager at the time.
Still is.
And then I realized, he still is. He still is a teenager. He's 18 now. And I remember he was playing Taylor Fritz at the US Open. And I thought, oh, this is the player Damien's always talking about. I should watch his match. And it was good, but Taylor Fritz totally blissed him off the court. I think he was also tired. He had a pretty good run at the US Open for a young new player. But it was nice to see him in person. And then watching him this week in Doha was just, I love when a player breaks through, when they just find their mojo or find their tennis and they really make great runs. And it started, unfortunately, with him beating Andy Murray.
I think it started before that, because he beat Alejandro Davidovich Fokina.
Well, he did beat Fokina before, but I think I started watching it at the Murray match, obviously, because I love Andy Murray. I want the best for him. He had just won his very first match of 2024. And I was like, this is it. We're going to go on a run. And Mensik said no. I'm 18 and I'm
Move
going to
over,
try and
old
win
man.
this tournament. And move over, Andy Murray.
Which he did later on the tournament when he beat Gal Monfils as well.
Yes. Which he did that. So he did it twice in one tournament. But he beat Andy Murray, he beat Gal Monfils, he beat Andre Rublev.
Yes, that was the big win. That was the one that made people sit up and take notice.
Yeah, he sort of notched his first top 5 win at this tournament. And again, it was just great to follow. He had so much energy on court. He has a really great style. Again, I think, and this is sort of his inexperience and his youth, watching him in the final, like in that first set, you could just tell every point was a lot, and he held it. It went to a tiebreak. The first set went to a tiebreak, and it was a long tiebreak too, but I think he was just gassed by the final, and I think that's something he'll work on and get a little bit more fit. But I'm excited to have another Czech male player, because there are tons of Czech female players. There are tons. They fall out of the woodwork, but we have very few Czech male players, and now he's one of them.
He is, and I mean, it's not like the Czech males don't have a history, but you're right. The country just tend to produce a lot more strong female players. So we'll see how Menchik does. I mean, given this result, it's looking very, very good for Menchik.
Yeah.
And they were all good wins as well. I mean, like that first set tiebreak against Khachanov could have gone either way, and maybe if he'd won it, the final could have gone in a very different direction. But I think he's a name that you're probably going to be hearing a lot more of on this podcast. Another name you're probably going to be hearing a lot more of on this podcast is an even younger player, a 17-year-old Brazilian who made the quarterfinals of Rio. His name? João
Fonseca. How did we first hear about João Fonseca? First of all, he won the US Open Junior Championships last year, and he is represented by On. So I actually saw him the very first time was because he was represented by On, and they had an event pre-US Open with Iga, with Ben Shelton, and then this kid. And I was like, who's that kid? And they're like, oh, he's playing in the junior tournament. So I was like, I thought that was great, because I was like, wow, they picked 2 sort of established players in the main tour and then a junior. And I thought that was really nice of On, but I didn't really know anything of him. And then he goes to win the junior tournament on the boys' side. And I thought that was great for On, great for this kid. But I tend to sort of take juniors, especially junior slam winners, with a grain of salt, because we don't really tend to see them come back. I mean, some of them do, obviously. Obviously, we have junior slam winners who are playing on the main tour, but sometimes they just seem to fade into nothingness. And you're like, oh, whatever happened to that kid? And there was conversations about him going to college. I think he is actually, he's said he's going to a specific college. I can't remember which one it is now, but they're still going to sort of leave that to the last minute to make the final decision on if he goes or not. But the second time he came into sort of my zeitgeist and, my view was at the World Tour Finals, because he was picked to be a hitting partner to all the 8 players who were playing at the tournament. And all I kept hearing on social media was Fonseca beat this person at a practice set. Fonseca beat that person at a practice set. Oh my goodness, Fonseca's hitting so well at the practice set. I'm like, what's happening? Who's this kid? Should we put him in the tournament? It kind of reminded me of when Rune was the kid who was at the practice, and they were like, who's this kid who's at the World Tour Final practicing with the big guys? And then that was it until the Rio Open, where he made a splash. And I think this is what I love too about the Golden Swing, because you do get a lot of Latin American players playing at home. This is their home tournament, and he's from Brazil playing in Rio. And I mean, all of his matches, I'm watching them from home and I can hear the scream. You could feel the screaming crowds supporting him and like edging him on. And his first round match was against Arthur Fils. I love Arthur Fils, but this was a beatdown. I've never seen anything like it. I think, I don't know, I think Arthur Fils did not know what to do. It was one of those, the score was 6-love, 6-4. So Arthur Fils in the second set kind of woke up a little bit, but he came out like, Fonseca came out like a rocket and didn't really stop until he got to the quarters. It was a sight to see, and I could not type his name more all caps than I already have over this past week.
Yeah, I haven't seen the matches that Fonseca's played because wrong time zone.
Yeah. Tough time zone for you. Yeah, really tough actually.
Yeah, where they schedule matches. Like I could have watched it, but like it just wasn't, especially since they put his matches on quite late. So I've seen highlights. The highlights I've seen, he strikes the ball monstrously. I'm not surprised he could keep up with the top guys in Turin. Maybe they should have just flown him out to Jeddah. But
I feel like they should have,
given how that tournament went. And so it's promising signs. The guy who beat him, Navone, is actually playing in the final in Rio against Sebastian Baez, all Argentine final. But yeah, Fonseca is the name's going to get picked, and now he's going. Those two, Mensik and Fonseca, are going to be in the same category as Fils, who obviously is still also a teenager. Who, when they're put in a draw, everyone's going to wonder how they do. Everyone's going to be looking to see how they perform.
If you do watch any match, you should watch his qualifying match with Navano. Really bad at pronunciation, but you should watch his qualifying. Yeah, you should watch his qualifying match because he was very much like Mensik. He was done physically. He was cramping. He was really done physically. He won the first set 6-2 and then lost the last two sets 6-3, 6-3. But that was because he could barely move. But some of the points he was able to sort of get out of his body in those last two sets while cramping was very impressive for a kid of his age. He's 17. So you're thinking, oh, if he can do that at 17, what is he going to do when he builds physically and he has the endurance to keep up in the matches? And another thing is, I think Mensik is now in the top 100. With his run in Doha, he was able to get into the top 100. Fonseca is, I think he went up tons. He started the tournament, I think, in the 600s. And now is in the 300s of the world. He just got a wild card into the next tournament, which is in Chile. And, it'll be interesting to see. My main thing right now is watching to see what he does. Does he go to college and pull a Ben Shelton where he finishes college? He has a great college career. And then he comes out when he's sort of 21, 22 and sort of, takes over on tour. Or does he pull a Mickelson, who's someone else that kind of made waves a little bit early in the week in Del Rey? And does he not go to college? Does he decide at 17 to go on tour?
And that depends on how quickly he performs. Like, if he's top 100 level already, and he's willing to do the school of tennis life instead of actual school, and he can be successful doing that, why not? If, on the other hand, it's no, this is still going to be a steady progress, so let's get a college degree while you can. It's going to be a lot easier to do it at your age, and then come in and sort of, once you've matured a bit, and do the Shelton route. So I think it's going to literally come down to, is he going to, what his results going to be kind of week in, week out on the tour, if he plays, I remember when Iga won her first slam at Roland Garros 2020, and she was talking about, we're going to do this tennis thing for a couple of years, see if it works out. And if not, then I'm going to go to college. And
it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out, girl. It worked out. You won a slam at 19. I kind of answered her own question. So I think if Fonseca does something, maybe not win a slam, but something along the lines of, no, I can compete with the top 100 right away, I don't see a reason why he would need to go to college if this is going to be his chosen career, unless he really, really wanted that backup the career was cut short by an injury or something.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because again, the sort of the life of tennis, if he decides to not go to school, might be a long road, because again, he's 300 in the world. He did get a wild card into the Santiago Open, which is coming up now. So maybe he can build some more points there. But if not, he's playing qualifiers, and it's not going to be direct entry into tournaments. And it's a lot of work to do. And he might do well by going to college, maybe even for a year. Maybe he doesn't go, for the whole 4 years. It'll be interesting to see. Again, I think it's really easy to sort of be in this time where you have all these wins and you're beating the top players. And so you're thinking, well, if I'm beating them already, why not just go for it? It'll be interesting to see what he chooses. But let's wrap it up, because this is a long one. We did a lot happened in 2 weeks. What's coming up? What's coming up on the WTA?
We're getting ready for the Sunshine Double, as we all are. All of their tournaments are in the US. We've left the Middle East. We are now in the US. We have a WTA 500 in San Diego, where Jessica Pegula is...
She's back.
Yes, after about a month off. She's the top seed in San Diego. She's going to be wanting to remind everyone that she's still here. And then you've got the 250 happening in Austin, where Victoria Azarenka is the top seed. Lots of interesting players kind of scattered through both fields. But really, this is where, particularly San Diego, I think is going to be used as the ideal prep for Indian Wells. Maybe Austin's close to Miami. I think the WTA Tour is now in full Sunshine Double prep mode, as I have been since the start of this podcast.
It'll be interesting to see who's coaching Jessica now.
I genuinely don't know. I don't really pay that much attention to it. It's off-court stuff. We'll find out when he gets in the box. Or it's a she. Hopefully it's a she.
Hopefully it's a she. I'm still waiting for Kim Clijsters to just jump on Anza's team. Like, that's my hope and dream. But yes, hopefully it is a she. Okay, on the men's side, on the ATP side, we are, prepping for the Sunshine Double. So you'll see players, for example, Novak and Nadal have gone over. There's a really cute photo of them that they took. They were on the same flight to California. So there's a photo out there of both of them. So they're there. Carlos Alcaraz, who's still he's recovering from his ankle strain, is going to Indian Wells. So he will start his prep. He's not going to be in any tournaments. And I believe neither is Sinner. Sinner is not going to be in any tournaments either. I don't know if he's on his way or if he's still in Italy. But those two will not be in any tournaments. There is the Netflix Slam.
Yes, I was going to wonder if you were going to mention that.
Yeah, it's an event that I'm going to go to a watch party, which basically, because of the time zone, it's happening in the middle of the afternoon, but I'm going to a watch party with friends and just to experience what it is. At first, when it was first announced, it was just a match between Rafael Nadal and Carlos Alcaraz. And I totally understand it. It's like the older generation, the newer generation, clash, Netflix Slam. It's really nice to see all these sort of more traditional mainstream media get into tennis, because that just tells you how popular tennis is becoming again. But there's going to be they've added some events. There's going to be an ace-off, I think it's what it's called. Sam Querrey, it's going to be in it, John Isner, Taylor Fritz, and Francis Tiafoe. So this is a male-centric event. There, as of right now that I know of, there are no WTA players that are included in the Netflix Slam. But I'll be interested to see how it is, aired and shown. And Netflix is definitely doubling down on their tennis investment, it looks like. So that will be happening just before Indian Wells. But during this week coming up, we have the men's tour is in Dubai for 500. And there's also the tennis tournament in Acapulco, which is also another 500 event. And finally, the event that we've talked about that Fonseca is going to be in is the event in Santiago, Chile. Who's playing? Well, I think we're seeing the return of Medvedev since the Australian Open, so it'll be nice to see how he's doing. I know he's recovering from a foot thing that he had at the Australian Open. So he'll be playing in Dubai. Rublev's playing in Dubai. Bublik. Andy Murray's playing in Dubai. So that's definitely where the big names are. It is a 500 event. On the other side, we also have another 500 event in Acapulco where we have Zverev, we have Dimonor, we have Nori, who we didn't really talk about Nori. He was close to getting back to the finals of Rio, but his match that happened yesterday, the semis that happened yesterday, were in the most insane conditions. I think we have a friend who is covering the tournament, and the field temp was like over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And Nori looked like death playing tennis. And he stuck it out. He played the whole match. Hopefully he's recovered enough for Acapulco, but don't be surprised if he pulls out because he really did look awful. Jack Draper, Tommy Paul, Taylor Fritz, Francis Tiafoe, Chris Eubanks, Ben Shelton. I mean, that's where the Americans decided to go. They're all in Acapulco this week in preparations for the Sunshine Double. The last tournament in Chile is mostly a Latin American affair. So, we've got Joao Fonseca, who got a wild card. Facundo Diaz Acosta is playing, who won the tournament last week. And yeah, those are the biggest. Garin is playing. I think Cerundolo is playing too, possibly. I'm not sure. But yeah, definitely all the Latin Americans are staying in Latin America.
Essentially, if you're European, you're following Dubai. If you are American, you're following Acapulco. And if you're in South America, you're following Santiago. It's basically how it's going to run.
It's perfect.
And
everyone has their own little tournament.
I'm going to say this now. I am probably not going to watch any Acapulco because Acapulco is always on after midnight my time. Just always. So there is I have no way of watching it and staying sane. So I will have to miss it, but I will probably catch some of Dubai in between what's going on with San Diego.
And I think this is also a note. It's impossible. We have a tennis podcast and we do not watch every single tennis match. It's impossible. Pick which one's in your time zone and which one's more comfortable to your work schedule and your life schedule and all that. And then just enjoy the tennis. And if there are big matches that come up in maybe a different time zone, there's always a replay. I just love tennis. So I don't even mind if I know what the scores are. I'll still watch a match, But yeah, that's all we've got for today. Nick, we know what you're going to be watching. I will mostly be watching Acapulco and Santiago, I think, depending on the time zone stuff. And of course, San Diego, because got to throw in the nice WTA in the mix there. This podcast has gone long, but that's just what it is. A lot happened this week. But how did I forget? We have to say our players of the fortnight because I know who mine is, but who's yours, Nick?
I know we kind of have an unspoken agreement not to pick our favourites, but I have to for this one for multiple of reasons, and that is Iga Swiatek. And the reason is, one, she performed the best across the 2 weeks. Won Doha, semi-final in Dubai. Her points yield over the 2 weeks was the biggest. But also, her loss generated a lot of a conversation about expectations of her and when she loses, which we kind of touched on a little bit. And kind of, something I kind of waded into is, well, hang on, why do we think she loses? What do you actually realistically think? Is it realistic to say that she should win every match she plays? Which is what some people who like her, like myself, would prefer, but I'm a realist. And I kind of started a conversation a little bit, which maybe it's worth picking up on another episode of when we go into seedings and what kind of expectations that sets for fans, new and old, of players, because you see a number next to a name and you make an assumption of how they're going to do. But so for me, it's Iga, not just because of her performance across the 2 weeks, but for the conversations that got started amongst the fandom after her loss to Kanskaya.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that's why a lot of people do get upset with upsets because they're like, but their number says they should win the tournament. And it doesn't always work that way. I kind of will go unorthodox as well with this player of the fortnight because I couldn't pick one. I couldn't. So the teenagers are the players of the fortnight.
I'll let you have more than one.
Mensik and Fonseca, just their breakout runs in those tournaments really were impressive and made me remember why I love the sport of tennis and just, discovering new people. Because, I mean, my personal story with tennis is I did get into sort of big three land. And when Roger started to fade and there was this scare of, wait a second, what happens when there's no Nadal, Roger, Novak to watch? Well, I was like, well, then tennis is over. Like, tennis is done. There's no more tennis. And, kind of the pivot I've made to discovering new players and, sort of following trajectories of maybe you see someone at a challenger and then you watch them fight and grow and go up the rankings and then they're up there in the rankings, and can they sustain? Can they keep it up? That has brought me a lot of joy in tennis. And so watching these teenagers like make their moves this week has been just so joyful and exciting. And I can't wait to see, looking back when it's December and we look back on the year and say, well, what happened? Did they make it? Did they do it? What could change? Or were they just, a flash in the pan? I really hope not, because their brand of tennis is so exciting. So those are my players of the fortnight: João Fonseca and Jakub Mensik.
Have to be them. It would have been weird to pick anyone else.
Really weird. Love you, Sinner. Anyway, we're done for the day. We're done with this week. Stay tuned to our social medias, and I will be posting our guides on the Miami Open and Indian Wells. Hopefully I will see some people out there. If you see me at Miami, say hello. Leave comments. I love interacting with all the people who message or reply to our posts on Threads. We now have a Twitter X handle as well, so I'll put all of that in the description. And keep watching tennis.
Keep watching tennis. It's all brilliant every week. Don't try and watch all of it, but you can always watch some of it in a week. Have your weekly dose. But yeah, we'll be picking this back up in a couple of weeks as Indian Wells just gets started. We'll be out in the desert, and where we're going in the desert, we don't need roads.